My center, Study of Digital Life, is really very interested in the role Japan will play in this topic of this conference. So I'm very pleased to hear your paper. My question is, my understanding is that the imperial investiture is a Taoist ceremony, and that the audience for the recent events in Japan had a much larger audience in China than they did in Japan. And that in many ways, in that level of Japan, there is the belief that the mandate of heaven actually shifted from China to Japan. My question is, this nothingness in Kyoto school, which you're describing to us today, to what degree does this actually relate to a version of Buddhism or a version of Taoism, and how might that be a part of the way that Japan will play a role in the class we're talking about?
Right. The relationship with Buddhism, I think, was also implied in the previous question, which I forgot to respond to. But certainly, the Kyoto school thinkers were inspired by Mahayana Buddhism, also Taoism. You know, Tao, in Chinese Taoist texts, there's the concept of Wu, which is the same sinograph, which in Japanese becomes Mu, nothingness. And then also certainly the Mahayana Buddhist concept of emptiness, Kong in Chinese, or Ku in Japanese, inspired them. And the different Kyoto school thinkers do refer to these texts, mostly the Mahayana Buddhist texts, but once in a while they might mention a Taoist text. The relationship with heaven, Tiansha, the mandate of heaven, or the whole world under heaven, Tiansha, that's also an interesting relationship, because they did, during the symposia that I talked about, they did refer to the Tiansha concept a few times, and they saw it as one possible ideal model for a future world order. But there's also a point where one of them, I think it was Koyama, criticized the Chinese idea of heaven, or Tian, as precluding an understanding of change. So Koyama at least seemed to think that nothingness is more dynamic and allows for change in time rather than Tian. How this applies today is another question, because the symposia was in during World War II. It was in the 40s, 1941, 1942. You know, after the war, the Kyoto school received a very bad rap. They were criticized for their associations with the imperialist government, and all the leftists who had to be underground, they became overground, and the leftist intellectuals criticized the Kyoto school. And it's only recently, in the last few decades, that intellectuals in Japan started to look at the Kyoto school again to try to see if there's a way to read them in a more favorable light. And then even Marxist intellectuals like Hiromatsu Wataru, who I mentioned, he actually in his writings on the Kyoto school, initially he was very critical of the Kyoto school and the idea of a co-prosperity sphere, but then right before he died, he wrote about the possibility of maybe appropriating the idea of a co-prosperity sphere in a more favorable manner, by avoiding the imperialistic tendencies from the war. So there are attempts today to try to develop Kyoto school ideas in a way that might make more sense, better sense. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.